Breaking news in the NBA, Kyrie Irving has torn his ACL and will miss the remainder of the season. Before we get into this is a breaking news edition of the State Line Fast Break podcast. We will get into the rest of the episode with Josh. That is about the NBA ratings, a few outlooks on some lottery teams, including the Pelicans and the Jazz. But I just wanted to hop on here and touch on this Kyrie Irving injury. Devastating news for the Dallas Mavericks, who just recently traded away Luka Doncic, who had Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, who believed what Nico Harrison said sets them up for this year, sets them up for the future. Now both of these guys are out. There was even a report today after the Kyrie news that he had suffered his torn ACL in his left knee, that Anthony Davis might miss the remainder of the year. This is devastating news and just complete malpractice from the Dallas Mavericks. They trade away Luka Doncic, and now you're without the two guys that you were going to build your roster around. Prior to tearing his ACL, Kyrie had averaged 39.3 minutes over his last 10 games. It's devastating. Kyrie was on track to be an all-NBA caliber player. He's the only player in the NBA this year who's averaging at least 20 points, who's also shooting 40% from three-point land and 90% from the free throw line. Nico Harrison, what's the future now? You have Kyrie, who is now extension eligible. He can opt out. He could sign up to a 4-year, $266 million extension with Dallas. An ACL injury like this is devastating to a player of Kyrie's nature because of the explosiveness, the quickness that he likes to play with. What is his future there? It would make me nervous if I'm Dallas, who would want to sign him to a long-term extension like that, where he's pushing over 30, suffers a significant injury that hinders some of the best parts of his game. And where does Dallas go from now? You got to think, without Anthony Davis, without Kyrie Irving, without some of these big guys that they've had, that this might be a chance for them to take a step back, tank, try to get into the lottery, see what your options are there. It's Nico Harrison, what are you doing? Should he even have a job? Some people are saying after this news. They were expected to be a title contender with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving this year. They trade away Luka to get Anthony Davis, and now they've got nothing. Max Christie showed some potential. You've seen P.J. Washington and some of these other guys. If I'm Klay Thompson, I'd be severely disappointed that I was promised to come here and play as an off-ball scorer for one of the best creators in the world in Luka Doncic and another great playmaker in Kyrie Irving, and now both of those guys have gone. You had a chance to compete. Now you look at the Warriors, who Klay Thompson's previous team now they're legit 8-2 now in the Jimmy Butler era, 8-1 in games that Jimmy Butler actually plays in. This is devastating news for the Mavericks. I don't know where they go from here. Kyrie, superstar. You're going to sign him, make him the face of your franchise, sign him to a 4-year massive contract extension this offseason. And now there's question marks regarding that. Do you even want to bring him back with this injury? Would you want to sign and trade, maximize the ability to get assets out of him? The Mavericks are in a terrible position. They were in a terrible position after the Luka trade. We were questioning what they were doing then. They're sitting here today as we speak, 32-30, up on the Suns, 3.5 games in the play-in race. I just don't know what the direction of the Mavericks are. You've got to tank your way out, see what draft pick you can end up in, because you really don't have a lot of draft picks moving forward, as we've talked about in the previous episode. They give away Luka Doncic. They don't get any significant first-round draft picks in return. They've already traded away to try to improve the roster a lot of their first-round draft picks within the next few years. They don't really own team control of these picks until 2031. This is devastating news if you're the Mavericks fan. I don't know where they go from here. Does this rethink the way that they want to build around Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis? There's a lot of question marks to be asked. I think it was important to jump on here and talk about it a little bit, considering we just had an episode with a main topic around the Mavericks. This changes everything. I don't think Nico Harrison should have a job after this year. He hasn't proved that he could put a successful program together. They made a finals run last year, and they completely blowed the team up. Now they're completely injured. You have to think, if you're Nico Harrison going into this offseason, tear it down. Tear it down. See what you can get out of Kyrie. See what you can get out of Anthony Davis. Trade P.J. Washington. I would keep Max Christie and Derek Lively. Definitely trade away Gafford. I don't like the outlook of this team anymore. I thought maybe going into the next year, if you get all these guys healthy, but now you've got Kyrie, who's going to be significantly limited. He's going to have pretty much no offseason. You don't know if he's going to be there for the start of the year. It would be wise if they tore it down now. They should have traded Luka for a tear-it-down package when they did. They shouldn't have tried to trade. If you're going to trade a generational, all-NBA, perennial MVP candidate away like that, you've got to just maximize your assets, get as many young players, get as many picks as possible. And now you've traded for a team that's going all in, who now might not even make the play-in race. They're definitely not going to make the playoffs with this roster. They're not beating any of those teams in the play-in right now. And they're damn sure not going to make a run moving forward in the playoffs. So you've got to look at this roster, assess how you look at it going into the offseason, and I would tear it down. I'd trade Klay Thompson. I'd trade Kyrie Irving. I'd trade Anthony Davis. And it would start by firing Nico Harrison and get somebody competent enough in the room that's able to do this and rebuild this roster, replenish the assets that Nico's given away, and see what you can do moving forward. Terrible, devastating news for the Mavericks. I don't know where they go from here, and I think it makes their situation all the more fascinating going into the offseason. So that's going to wrap up a little bit of this breaking news edition, and now we're going to get you into the rest of this episode. Welcome in. This is episode 3 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I am your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. Today we're going to do a deep dive on NBA ratings. We're going to talk about a few of the lottery teams' outlooks as the race for the best chance at the number 1 pick is heating up. Let's get right into this ratings talk.
To start some of these midweek podcasts, we're going to do a deep dive into some premier topics around the NBA that are pretty polarizing that we think we can dive into and give some insight to. The NBA ratings, they just signed a new 11-year deal worth $76 billion with ABC and ESPN. This deal allows them to gain access to the Inside the NBA partnership, which is famous for Kenny, Chuck, Shaq, and Ernie as a legendary broadcast foursome. Makes their way from TNT over to ESPN for the pregame shows. To talk a little bit about the ratings, the deficit during this year was 19% during NFL and MLB seasons, only down 5% in the month of February after the conclusion of the NFL. There's a lot of scrutiny on the NBA for the way that they have marketed and broadcasted the sport of recent and some of the changes that they are making. The ratings have been down for a few years. I want to know, Josh, how concerned are you with this, and what should the NBA be looking at moving forward on how to adjust and adapt to modern?
So the NBA ratings as a whole, you watch all these shows on ESPN and everyone's discussing this, and it is a little concerning, but the fact that everyone's talking about it lets you know that people care about it. It's not just Kasey and I who care about these certain things, but there is reasons as to why some of these ratings are down. And a lot of those are to do with the style of the game. People have a lot of complaints about the three-point shot, how it's affected the game in sort of a negative way, as the connotation around the NBA is no one plays defense anymore. And the physicality has been legislated out of the game, and it's game to game depending on the referee crew you have. But overall, I'm not as concerned as everyone else, because I believe the NBA is in a great spot due to the stars that are in the league. And yes, LeBron is on his way out, and I do think for the short term, a lot of the LeBron fans will, the ratings will go down a little bit, and I think there'll be another person, maybe not to the dramatic level of following as LeBron has, but there's going to be another star. I mean, we got the argument every day on all these shows about who's going to be the next face of the league, and I do believe that is an important conversation that needs to be had. I mean, Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, SGA, a lot of these guys, I mean, guys coming out this year, maybe a Cooper Flag, you never know kind of how these things will turn out. There's a lot of different aspects that relate to the ratings being down, although they can't be down that much as $76 billion has just been invested into the NBA, and people are going to continue to watch it. Obviously, it's going to be down while the NFL is on just because of how many people support the NFL. But as soon as March Madness ends, the NBA ratings tend to do better, although you have some of the numbers and you've hit on that. But how do you believe that the face of the league, does the NBA need a face of the league going forward after LeBron, after Steph Curry leaves? How do you kind of feel about that?
I think they do, but they have, like you just talked about, there's several names that I think you can fill into that void pretty easily. You talked about Wemby, you talked about Ant, you talked about Luka. Those are already three premier faces of the league. You still got guys like Anthony Davis, you got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you got Jokic. These are premier names in the league, and I don't know that star power is necessarily the problem. My biggest pushback and what I think is the biggest reason for these ratings, I think the quality of the sport is at peak level right now. The players are as good as they've ever been. The talent level, the big name stars, all of that has not changed from the NBA over the years. The way that we broadcast and the way that we distribute the game of basketball itself is pretty poor. The way that they've done it now. You got guys like Kendrick Perkins. They put so much, they put guys that aren't super detail-oriented and knowledgeable about the game of basketball. These are they have bad reputations online. They're almost viewed as clown personalities when you get on Twitter. They do so much talking about Bronny James, LiAngelo Ball. They do talking about things that don't actually matter to the sport or the game of basketball. They don't talk about their stars. They don't market it well on social media. Adam Silver, in a recent press conference, said he believes that the game is at its highest popularity, and they believe that because of the reach that they can have on social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. But it's concerning because since 2019, NBA final ratings have been cut almost in half. If you add the NBA viewership of every finals game from last year and tripled it, then you would finally reach what the Super Bowl viewership was. So I think a big part of this is, obviously, the game is not as big as football, and there's a lot more games. So the single game viewership is not going to be near the level of a single game viewership for the NFL. But the fact that since 2019 and after COVID, when you should have been using social media to push this league, use guys like Zach Lowe, use guys like Tim Legler, who you've kind of thrown off the shelf. ESPN completely fired Zach Lowe right before they signed this big NBA media rights deal. He was one of the most popular influencers in basketball from very smart people that you read and react to online. Fired him. He doesn't have a big platform to talk about the game anymore. They finally put Tim Legler, who's one of the smartest basketball people in the world, calling basketball games on their platform. The fact that we are enabling guys like Malika Andrews, Richard Jefferson, Kendrick Perkins, people that do not provide very good insight and analysis and do a good job of marketing and reaching an audience that I think basketball in the past has previously tried to reach, and the viewership that they are losing. We need to do a better job. And we saw it with the All-Star game. The broadcasting was terrible. The actual basketball itself became better, but then the theatrics around it, you had Mr. Beast taking half-court shots with some random goon from the floor. They spent 30 minutes listening to Kevin Hart yap with Shaq. We want to see the game of basketball. We want to broadcast what's great about the game of basketball. We don't need celebrities. We don't need all these polarizing Skip Baylesses, these guys that just, Stephen A. Smith, who just think that their brand, what they have to say is more important than what's actually on the court in the game. That's what's wrong with NBA today. That's what's wrong with the viewership. people don't want to watch that. They want to go and watch the game, and the fact that we've got these personalities in the game, I think that's really hindering the reach that this league has the potential to get to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of NBA fans, especially people at our age, we got to have the main crew of ESPN with Mike Breen, Van Gundy, and Mark Jackson, and everyone. When those three were calling a game, you just knew it was the biggest game of the week. They were gonna give the best analysis. They had great.
There's analysis in boxing like a big fight feel. When those three were on the broadcasts, and you had those classic ESPN graphics, those games had big fight feels. You know that something spectacular was going to happen.
And now, I mean, you got Mike Breen having to sort of carry the load as they've just been adding new pieces in with him on the main crew. Doris Burke, no offense to her, but it just doesn't. The analysis is not the same without these guys, and I think, in my opinion, TNT has been far superior with their. Yes, the All-Star game was a disaster
atrocious
from that standpoint, but when it comes to big games, big-time feels, the Inside the NBA crew is unmatched as far as pre-game shows, post-game shows, and I believe TNT has the much better announcing teams when you have Reggie Miller, Harlan, Van Gundy, and I want to try to be as optimistic as I can, although we're hitting pretty negatively right now. This NBC is about to. They're going to have a part of the conference finals next year, and I'll just read some of the names that they've hired that I'm excited about, and a couple of them I'm got some issues with, but they're hiring Carmelo Anthony. We'll see how he does. Reggie Miller obviously has been with TNT for a while. People have mixed emotions on him. I like his analysis. I think he's positive for the game of basketball. Jamal Crawford, I think he needs a bigger platform when it comes to basketball. I think he gives great analysis. And the main crew, or the main play-by-play, is going to be Mike Tirico, which I'm a little confused about because he does the Sunday Night Football currently with Chris Collingsworth. I'm really curious to see how that's going to be. They've hired Dirk Nowitzki. They've hired Blake Griffin. They've gotten one of the bigger TNT sideline reporters and Taylor Rooks. I mean, it seems to me it's going to some sort of revamp TNT as in NBC, although the finals team is still going to be ran through ABC and ESPN, which it's concerning. You read the numbers; they've went down each year from 2019, and though LeBron may have had a lot to do with those, as he hasn't been in the finals here recently, but there's been too much shape-shifting, hiring people, firing people. You lose J.J. Redick. You had him calling the finals. He leaves. I'm just confused on why the NBA or the ESPN got rid of some of these premier guys to hire some of the people that they did. And you're right. They hit on topics. We just want to watch the game of basketball. We're talking about things that don't matter. A little bit about the basketball standpoint, though. The late game reviews system that has been
awful.
It drags the games out way too long. The reviews, I mean, I don't necessarily love how the review system works personally. If you listen to the previous episode of this podcast, we talked about Anthony Edwards and a couple other guys, how they constantly are complaining, but there's not a player in the NBA who gets a foul call who isn't in the referee's face complaining. I mean, that is not a good look for the game of basketball, as the camera always follows that reaction. And the NBA is always going to be about star power, and that's just how it's going to be. And the NBA has as many stars as they've ever had, so that is the best part about all of this. But from a TV standpoint,
the problem is they've got the stars. They don't know how to market them. Because the game, you look at it. I saw a stat the other day. The last, was it 5 or 6 MVPs have all been foreign.
Mm-hmm.
The previous when the MVP became a thing in the NBA, previously before these last 5 or 6 years, only 3 foreign players had ever won it before. It was all Americans, the rest of them. They don't know how to market these foreign guys. They don't know how to build these brands up in America. They don't know how to market Nikola Jokic. He's not a vibrant personality. He doesn't speak perfect English. Same with Wembanyama. Same with Luka Doncic. That's what they're struggling with. But the game of basketball is so global. You saw guys like Kobe Bryant able to go overseas to different countries, make a global impact. The NBA should be leaning into their global stars. They should be leaning into the fact that this could be a globalized game. They have to figure out how to market their star players better instead of worrying about LeBron James's kid, worrying about these people that don't have a legit impact on the top tier level of the game. ESPN's a joke. They don't know how to do it properly. There has to be a fix for this. They've got to lean into it. That's going to be the biggest difference, is that can merge that gap, figure out how to really take the game globally. And they've done it. They've started taking games overseas. You see a lot of games in Mexico. The Spurs just took Wemby to France to play the Pacers twice. You're going to see more and more games out of the United States as the years goes on, just like the NFL started to do with games in Germany. Lean into it. Lean into your global stars. Lean into the fact that this game goes far beyond just American talent now. We're going to have an American talent come in this year with Cooper Flagg. You're going to have A.J. Debinsa come in the 2026 draft. Push these guys to the moon the moment they come in, because you're going to need new American stars, but figure out how you can merge the gap and push these foreign stars to the level that they should be pushed to and perceived on a national level, but also in American basketball. We don't appreciate these guys and the skill set they bring to the game as much as we should.
And one final point I just want to make about this is, you say a game is going to start at 8 and it could be 8:15, 8:20 before we see a tip-off. Especially, it's a little worse through the ESPN, because they'll say at 8:30 tip-off, but really that's just when they start NBA on ESPN and you have Stephen A. Smith, Kendrick Perkins, Malika Andrews all sitting at a desk, and it says countdown till tip-off. You'll see 15 minutes, but it's the time they said the tip-off was going to be. That's got to be fixed. Start the pregame show before if you're going to try and discuss the game, and start the games when they actually, especially as someone, both of us live on the East Coast, these games start very late over here. NBA's got to do a better job with that. TNT isn't quite as bad as that, but I'm very curious and trying to be optimistic about this NBC and even some Amazon Prime leading into next season.
Well said. I was going to touch on that. I don't think I've seen a game all year start on, and even if they're broadcasted on NBA League Pass, they almost never start on time. It's a joke, and the replay review, these games should not take 2.5, 3 hours like they do. If they could condense down the time, they need to add a replay assist like the NFL has, like other leagues have, where just a quick call in to one of the officials, hey, this is what the call should be. Let the referees ref the game, but just give them some assistance so we're not sitting at a monitor with 13 seconds left when a team's down 4 and the game's probably out of reach. And they're sitting at the monitor for 10 minutes trying to figure out a call that probably doesn't even impact the game that much. It's a joke, and they need to figure that out pronto. And hopefully with this new media rights deal, they get investments in those replay assist abilities, get additional staffing, and go hire back your smart basketball people, and instead of just these vibrant personalities that are just there for theatrics. That's going to be what can take this. The NBA can definitely have a resurgence. They can definitely, like Adam Silver said, with the use of social media these days, they can absolutely get back to the levels that they have been in the past in terms of popularity. But they've got to lean in to their stars, lean into these new media rights deals and what that can provide for you. And I think that they can have that resurgence that a lot of fans like us would like to see. Now, enough of us yapping about the NBA ratings. We're going to dive down deep into several of these lottery projected teams. Like we talked about, Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson. There's a lot of star talent in this upcoming draft class. So then we're going to look deep into several of these lottery teams. Going to touch on all 14 eventually. We're going to hit on a couple today. We're going to start out with the future of the New Orleans Pelicans. Zion Williamson has started playing again, pretty healthy, has looked explosive, physical. If they can keep him healthy, if they have a shot to land Cooper Flagg, watch out. They've won a few games here in a row. They're starting to show signs of improvement now that they've got Zion Williamson back on the court. There's reports that this is the lowest he's ever been in his professional career. I'm intrigued by the Pelicans. Do you have any additional thoughts?
I'm not quite as optimistic on their future, and the question should be asked: will Zion Williamson be traded at some point? And I think potentially they will look to move him, and maybe he needs a fresh start. The only concern with him has simply been injuries and weight. And yes, he is the lowest of his career, and he's only played minimal games this year, but he's averaging 24, 25 a game on 55% shooting. I know he's an undersized 4. My concern with him is only averaging 7 rebounds for somebody who's as explosive of an athlete as Zion Williamson is. That is a little concerning to me. Willie Green, I really do think he's a very good coach. And I'm going to go back to last year, the play-in tournament. They're playing the Lakers. Zion Williamson had 40 points and was about to win the game for them, then pulls a hamstring, and look at where they're at now. And I thought they were really close. They moved Ingram to Toronto. I don't understand some of the moves that were made, but a lot can be changed if they get the number 1 pick or number 2 pick. We'll see. I mean, you touched on the 3 guys. I think a lot of people are under the agreement that the top 3, whether the order is Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, more than likely, depending on the teams, what they need, are going to be selected in the top 3, and they're probably going to get one of them. Cooper Flagg and Zion, that would be very fun to watch, easy to market for the NBA. 2 Duke guys going number 1, athletic, power forward / centers. I mean, who do you think that they should look to draft? I mean, what is your overall thoughts here?
Well, obviously, if they get the number 1 overall pick, I think it's a no-brainer. You take Cooper Flagg and you figure it out later. If that means you trade Zion Williamson, or if that means you kind of shuffle around positions and just see how it fits for half a year, I think that's what you do. The reason I'm intrigued about the Pelicans is because you've got guys like Herb Jones, who hasn't played in many, many games. He's been hurt. I like Messi, the center that they drafted this past year. DeJounte Murray got hurt, out for the season. Trey Murphy is having a ridiculous year, 22 points a game. Not really something that I don't think many people expected. He's shooting 45% from the field, almost 8% from 3. That's a guy that, alongside Zion Williamson, you can start to build a foundation around. If they don't believe DeJounte is the long-term point guard solution there, if they can land Dylan Harper next to Trey Murphy, next to Zion, next to Messi, with Herb Jones in there, that's a solid roster that they can look to continue to build pieces around. You obviously are going to still need more star-level talent, but that's a good baseline that they could build around. There's some intriguing areas to look at when you're talking about the Pelicans. I'm not exactly sure the direction they're going to go with CJ McCollum. I'm also not sure how I feel about Dave Griffith, their general manager. Hasn't really done much of substance there. I mean, they've traded away to get DeJounte to pair him up with CJ McCollum. They've traded away Drew Holiday in his tenure there. I'm not sure that he's going to be there long term, and if I would trust him to be there long term. But I am a big fan of the way Zion. There's obviously he's not all the way back yet, and you mentioned some of the rebounding concerns. but I'm very encouraged by the way he looks. He looks slim. He looks explosive. He looks like he's in the best shape that we've seen in his professional career. I think that is encouraging, not only for the fact that they could build around him, continue to build around him, but if they were to decide to trade him, like they're going to have some interest because of the way that he has looked this year.
Yeah, I have been a Zion fan supporter since the days of Duke. I always like the way he plays the game. Doesn't need the ball. He's not going to complain. He's just going to He's going to find a way to impact the game, and whether if that's through lobs, putbacks, whatever it is. I do agree with you, but I feel like I've heard that 100 times, and here, even last year, I thought maybe they're going to potentially make a run, beat the Lakers in the play-in maybe, and there goes his hamstring, and look where the Pelicans are now. I just feel like it's too concerning long-term, and I could see they could potentially get a good package in return. David Griffin, I don't like what he's done. I don't understand the Ingram move to Toronto. C.J. McCollum has got... If this team wants to go anywhere, I think they have to somehow get off of him. Although I don't know many teams that'd be willing to take him on. He has a good game. Maybe he had a 50-point game this year. Although he's just too inconsistent at this point. And overall, I did like the way this team was trending, and this could be changed. But I don't like the team's future unless they can get the number one pick, and that changes a lot of things.
Another team I would be really intrigued about to get the number one pick because of a fit alongside another star player is the Utah Jazz. Can Lauri Markkanen and Cooper Flagg coexist? Would that be something that would work together? I would love to see Dylan Harper there. I think that would be the perfect fit next to Keontae George, next to Cooper Flagg. Or not Cooper Flagg, but Lauri Markkanen. I think that would be a really fun pairing. You got Walker Kessler, who's one of the best defensive bigs in the entire world right now. The Utah Jazz, I love the way that they've stockpiled draft picks. Their owner and general manager, Danny Ainge, had both invested significant financial money into BYU program, and they've gotten AJ DeBansa to commit there to play for next year. That kind of leads me to think that they've got a heavy eye that they're going to look to tank again next year regardless of what the draft outcome is this year. Their roster, like Sexton, Markkanen, Kessler, John Collins, this is a lot better roster. They're not a play-in team or a playoff team by any means, but they're better than a 15-win roster. You'll see minor injuries, quote-unquote, and illnesses that they're sitting guys for random reasons. They're tanking hard. They want the first overall pick this year, but I also think that they've got their eye more on that first overall pick next year.
Yeah, I didn't quite realize that, although I was going to touch on Danny Ainge. His track record has been, very good, and that's why I do trust this team moving forward in the future. Obviously, they're more than likely going to get one of those three guys. Walker Kessler, a lot of smoke the past 2 years from Lauri Markkanen's getting traded to Walker Kessler's getting traded, or the Lakers are gonna be making a move for a big this summer. I think everyone sort of expects that. Will that be Walker Kessler? We've heard it many times.
I know you're a big Jokic fan. Kessler joined Nikola Jokic as the only player in NBA history to record a 25-point, 10-plus rebound, 5-plus assist, and 0 turnover game while shooting 100% from the field.
Oh, don't you worry. I had that written down, and shout out Nikola Jokic. Only true great players like Nikola Jokic do this. Walker Kessler, not on that level, just had a fluke game. Anyways, I'm kidding, but Walker Kessler, Memphis Grizzlies were rumored to potentially be in the sweepstakes for him. I don't see us doing that now with Edey addition. I'd like Walker Kessler, liked him out of Auburn. Lauri Markkanen, you heard the smoke about the Warriors this offseason, and it didn't happen for whatever reason, which I still think maybe he gets moved depending on if they can get a Cooper Flag. I could see Lauri Markkanen being moved. And they could get a decent package for him and send him to a contender, and I think that could work out for both sides. Like I said, Danny Ainge knows what he's doing. A guy I know you wanted to touch on and talk a little bit about is Isaiah Collier and his emergence, as he has been assisting the ball at a very high rate as of late.
Yeah, he has emerged as a true playmaking point guard. He fell all the way down to 29th in the draft. They were able to get a steal with Collier. You've seen his ability to play make, find guys. He only needs to average 4.5 points assists per game in the final 26 Utah Jazz games to break John Stockton's rookie record for most assists in a season for a Utah Jazz player.
Yeah,
and that's a guy that leads the league all time in assists.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you think of best passers ever, John Stockton immediately comes to mind in that franchise. He's definitely a legend.
Yeah, there was a point in February he led all players, including Nikola Jokic and some of these premier point guards, in assists in the month of February.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Obviously, coming out of USC, people initially thought he would be a higher draft pick, fell to 29. Utah picks him up. I mean, say it again one more time here. Danny Ainge knows what he's doing. Like you said, it's about AJ coming out next year. BYU, not very far away. I mean, just long-term hypotheticals here that is going to be very hard to do.
But they've got more picks than anybody in the entire league right now.
So yeah, they could go make a move for somebody as well, but they could move up in the draft to take somebody they want. But let's say they somehow win the lottery, get the Cooper Flag this year, trade Markkanen, get some capital, maybe a player that can help them out, and then next year they get lucky again and get AJ. I mean, then you're talking Cooper Flag, Isaiah Collier if he keeps looking up, and then you got Walker Kessler. I mean, that team, like I said, I like this team not in the short term by any means, but 5 years from now I could see this team getting very back on track, back to when they had Donovan Mitchell, even back to the days when they had Gordon Hayward. This team's got a bright future.
Do you think there's any way that if they were to get Cooper Flag that him and Markkanen would be able to coexist?
That's what I was trying to say earlier. I think if they win that, I'd probably see him getting moved anyways, but definitely if they can land Flag, I see Lauri Markkanen getting traded, and that's another topic. Where could he fit in?
Because even in the offseason, there was heavy interest in trading Lauri Markkanen, and reportedly they got some pretty big-time offers. But
the Warriors were looking at him.
He wants to be in Utah by all reports, and I based on all my knowledge, the Jazz organization really value what he brings, and I think he's a really quality player. That's why I would like to see Markkanen stick around there, because I think he's a good fit for that team, that organization. I would like to see them get a guy like Ace Bailey or Edgecombe or Dylan Harper. I think they would fit a little bit better around what they've got. Keontae George, who's has an up and down shooting, not the most efficient player, but he can fill it up. He can score the basketball. He's a guy with a lot of upside in his last 13 games, 18.2 points, shooting 45, almost 46% from the floor. If they can get him to be more efficient, Taylor Hendricks, a disaster injury to start the year. Hope he can get healthy. That's a guy that I know that they think has a lot of upside. Sensaball's up and down. Sexton will probably be on the move sooner than later. Same with Jordan Clarkson and John Collins. That's something that is incredibly interesting to me, what the future of those guys with this organization are. I think they would like to keep Markkanen long term, but if they get Cooper Flag, that might force them to make a pretty tough decision.
I was gonna see if you could pull up Kyle Filipowski's stats this year. He's actually when watching him at Duke, I didn't think he would be translate very well, but he's had some games here where he's done some things that.
He had just the other night in Portland played 36 minutes, 20 points, 11 rebounds. A couple nights before that, 37 minutes against the Clippers, 20 and 10. So I mean, they've
gotten more
found in the
production.
second round.
They've gotten more production from him than I had expected when he came out of Duke. But
there's no doubt about it. The Jazz, they're right in the thick of things right now, sitting at the third projected lottery spot. They're a team that has a very bright future, a lot of avenues in which they can go with that roster. One team that has a horrendous future that doesn't have very many directions to go, and the only way that they can go is blow it up. The Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid just ruled out for the year with a knee injury, going to have to get surgery. There was even speculation on Twitter of what are possible retirement scenarios and way that the Sixers can get out of that contract. That's just a disaster. The Paul George contract's a disaster. Maxey's great, but they just don't have a lot around him. And we've talked about it, but the Sixers are a disaster.
Yeah, we touched on this back in episode 1, but I wanted to get a little bit more into it. Yeah, Embiid, he's done. He shouldn't have played in the Olympics. Now looking back, maybe this is too prisoner of the moment of me to say, but maybe Embiid knew his knee, didn't trust it, and was like, maybe this is the last opportunity I can get to do something like this. It's not smart for me long-term, basketball-wise, but this is something I could do to help my legacy out, have some fun, and play in the Olympics, and he did, knowing he probably should not have. And the 76ers probably did not like that he did that. Daryl Morey has got them in a very weird spot. They lose Harden, and then they overpaid Embiid based on how many games he's been able to play. They obviously have overpaid Paul George, as he's only had a very few, even 20-point games this season, having the worst year he's had statistically in, I believe, over 10 years. So he's dipped. That has not worked out. The only bright spots for this team, I mean, Quentin Grimes, that was very surprising to see what he did yesterday. Shout out Nico Harrison for also not having him on the roster in Dallas. But we talked about Jared McCain a little bit last time. I think another guy from Duke, played with Filipowski last year. I think he would have been Rookie of the Year without a doubt. Had average 15, multiple 30-point outings early in the season. And yeah, like you said, I think the 76ers should definitely, if they can't sort of get a trade package together, and looking back, they should have traded him to the Knicks. But
should have traded tried to trade Paul George to the Warriors. They seemed desperate for star-level talent. I think you could have, if they didn't like the Jimmy Butler situation there, they should have been dangling Paul George right in front of their face.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think the 76ers, if they can't move Embiid, they should try and get out of this contract any way possible, as far as the retirement contract clause situation that they could potentially resort to. I don't like this team's future. They don't have a first-round pick this year. They were close many years to, I say close, they never made an Eastern Conference Finals, although they definitely had the teams to. They got beat in a Game 7 against the Toronto Raptors that year, and we saw the buzzer beater. But this team, Daryl Morey's got this team in a weird spot, and it's not all his fault. And you got a coach in Nick Nurse who I like, although I just think the roster standpoint is pretty to very poor, and on top of that, they've had terrible injury luck.
I think this is a team that's similar to how we talk about the Mavericks. Like, the injuries, they don't really have full control of all of their picks until 2030. They're a team that's deep in salary cap trouble with 3 big-time contracts that 2 of them you're going to have a very hard time. They're in the first apron. there's just not a whole lot of positive outlooks when you look at this roster. You can still build a roster, but Maxey's such a hard player to build around because he's not very good defensively. Got to get Jared McCain healthy and playing. I like Oubre, but he's a guy that you need to be a 3-and-D wing on a competitive win-now roster. He provides them nothing of substance. Yabusele I'll always love for the dunk he had on LeBron. He'll always have my respect for that Olympics performance. They've started Justin Edwards a little bit, who's given them something, but not a whole lot of nothing. I just don't see any way, shape, or form that they could positively move forward. Because even trading Embiid, trading Paul George, you're likely not getting assets that are going to turn the future around and put you in a position to where you can build it out, like what the Thunder were able to do when they were able to trade Paul George and Westbrook and all of those guys. It's very doom and gloom if I were a Sixers fan, and just looking at the lottery outlook for them, they're not sitting too pretty. Like they're it's pretty deep odds for them. They're sitting around 7 or 8. If they were able to jump up and get Cooper Flagg, that would be realistically the only way.
I believe they don't have their first round pick this year.
It's heavily protected. They've got to get inside.
Okay.
I think it's got to get inside 6 to keep it. If I 1 through 4, so they've got to jump up pretty heavily to be able to even get it. And then in that situation, like if you were able to land one of those guys, then the outlook of the roster would be, you would have a little bit more positive moving forward, but you still just don't have any assets to build around that guy that you would be able to get.
Yeah, this Sixers team, just to keep it honest, this team has no future. And if I was a Sixers fan, I mean, I would be very mad about how this has transpired, and I think Paul George's decline has a lot to do with it, but overall Daryl Morey saw this opportunity. He's been aggressive in his tenure there, and they're just in a bad spot, and I don't think anyone can argue against that.
Do you think there's any way that if they were to run this roster back again that they would be able to just get in the playoffs, and like Paul George would be able to get back to a all-star, all-NBA type of level?
I think those days for Paul George are over now. Maybe next year, if healthy, maybe add a piece or here and there. But if they keep it together, I could see maybe sitting somewhere from 6 to 10 in the East. But you see Detroit's, they're a lot better. There's going to be a lot of teams looking to get a lot better, and the 76ers are getting nothing but older from their 2 stars. Now, they do have 2 young guards who are going to be who are both a lot high shot takers. Neither one of them are pass first. They can both pass the basketball in McCain and Maxey, but it's not what they want to do necessarily. You got a lot of players. It's just not a very well-constructed team. They don't have a true point guard. I mean, best case scenario for them, they can get in the play-in next year and have Embiid. Does he have another run in him? I mean, potentially. I mean, he's obviously a very dominant player when playing, but best case scenario for them is they can get to the second round next year. So
yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's even if these guys all came back healthy, I don't think the roster's good enough around them. I don't think Paul George can get back to the level that he was once at. I don't think Embiid's going to be able to ever stay healthy and have a full year again. I just think they're going to be stuck in turmoil, and that's just kind of the reality for the Sixers. It's doom and gloom. Playing maybe, but why would you even want that? I would blow this roster up and just see where it goes from there. But that just about wraps up a few of the lottery teams that we wanted to touch on today. Hit the NBA ratings pretty hard. Gave some pretty brutally honest feedback to ESPN. Hope they don't come crushing us for that. But Anyways, any closing thoughts on this episode and what you thinking moving forward with the podcast?
I mean, yeah, overall, just want to once again give thanks to everyone who's reaching out, and we have some of the people who are listening to this podcast are going to want us to hit on certain teams, certain players, certain subjects, and we are 100% willing to do so, but in order to do that, we are going to have the feedback and conversations, the comments, the ratings, all the certain things in order to do that. So we need y'all's help to give y'all what y'all want to hear. And overall, I mean, I'm having a blast doing this, preparing for this, talking about these things with you, and I like the direction that we're headed. And yeah, like you said, hopefully ESPN and Adam Silver aren't knocking on this door in a negative way anytime soon.
Like Josh said, we appreciate all your feedback. It's been a lot of fun at this point. We've got a lot of ideas that we want to continue to work towards with this podcast. As I mentioned in the past, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, at the State Line Fast Break Pod. This has been episode 3. Thank you for tuning in.